Salve, I'm David, and today I'm going to talk to you about how we can listen to Latin more effectively, the place of grammar in listening to Latin, and how speaking Latin can improve your Latin listening skills. Okay, so the first step here is to determine what effective listening is. So my idea of effective listening is when you hear something and you practically don't have to process the words anymore. It clicks in your head and it's almost instinctive. The meaning comes to you almost immediately. There's no processing. You don't have to think of meanings, think of how the ending translates, etc. I base this on the thought process that goes with English, because I find that when I hear English words, the meaning comes almost instinctively. It comes immediately. There's almost no thought process anymore involved. It's really quick, basically. Okay, let me just talk to you about a couple of problems I encountered concerning Latin listening skills. So first of all, I feel that the speed is one major factor in listening to Latin, because when the words are coming at you so quickly and you have to process all the words, you have to think of the meanings, the grammar, how the words fit together, etc. It's really difficult. Okay? So I think that's one thing, the speed of how it's read. And another thing would be the fact that Latin is an ancient language, and it's difficult when you take it into the modern context. Like, say for instance, we listen to this Latin news sort of thing, and because it's an ancient language put into the modern context, there's certain principles, certain ideas that really don't fit well or cannot be really expressed in their truest sense, because precisely it's an ancient language and several things have evolved, have changed over the years. Life has become more complex, so I feel that's another thing. And another problem would be the difference in expression of thoughts. If you look at a Latin sentence and analyze its construction, the words aren't arranged in the same way English sentences are constructed. So basically, like, the verb comes in the end, the noun comes at first, but I mean, the gist of it is it's not the same. So when you're listening to a Latin sentence, the words don't come in the way you're used to them coming in. So I feel that's another factor as well. Okay, so let me talk to you about a couple of solutions to these problems that I mentioned. One thing would be looking for context clues. So if you see certain words, like if you see the word ship, the word port, the word sea, then you can infer on basically what the sentence will look like in English. You can infer what a certain word will mean, etc. So context clues really help a lot. And I feel another thing would be that if you find a Latin word that sounds like an English word, then chances are their meanings are quite similar, because a lot of English is actually based on Latin. So that's another thing. If you look for English words that resemble the Latin word you hear and you get that meaning, chances are you can get an idea of what the sentence means. Okay, but this method also has downsides, because when you listen to Latin and base your processing on just this, then Latin becomes a language that's dependent on the English language and not a language that you listen to in itself. So what I want to recommend to you guys is you learn to make use of word-image association. So for example, when you hear the word puela, you should already think of an image of a girl. So it's that kind of thing. I find that that's how my English word processing works. It's basically when you hear a certain word, then an image of that thing comes into your mind. And if you base your Latin listening skills on just relating them to English, then you really won't develop fully. You won't develop your Latin listening skills fully. So what we want to foster is that practice of associating words with clear images, okay? That kind of thing. Improving your Latin listening skills would be to build your vocabulary. I mean, for obvious reasons. I feel that the more you're acquainted with more words in the Latin language, definitely you'll be more equipped, more capable of understanding something that is read to you in the language. So, yeah, you should build your Latin vocabulary. And another thing would be to practice listening and reciting the language. Basically, because the more you're familiar with the words, how they sound, then it will be much easier to understand something that is read to you. Just knowing the proper pronunciation, knowing how the words really sound can really help you, because just the familiarity with the sounds that come into your head can really help you associate that word with its proper meaning. I mentioned you should build your Latin vocabulary, but it shouldn't stop there. Basically, because even if you do know a lot of Latin words, but you don't know how they fit together, then you won't understand what you're hearing. So what I'm saying here is you should really know your grammar, especially your endings. Because what I realize is that Latin is a very hearing-oriented language, precisely because of its endings. And so if you're familiar with how, with the endings and the cases, the tense, the number the gender that's associated with these things, then it will really help your listening skills. For instance, we know how accusatives end. They almost always end with M or S, right? Something like that. So if you know this and you hear a word that ends with that sound, then you can immediately put that word in your head as the receiver of the action, right? So when you pair this with your with building your vocabulary, then you have really equipped. You have the tools to really understand what you're hearing. I help you in your quest to improve your Latin listening skills. I'm David Olete.